Hey, hello everybody. I'm Amanda Forys. I am the managing partner of Magnolia Market Access. We are so excited that you all joined us today. We have our monthly webinar series called Navigating Market Access with Magnolia. And the idea is for us to bring you all a unique topic each month. This is our third one, and we're so excited to have so many clients that have signed up and are attending these. What we try to do here is bring something each month that's a hot, relevant topic or something to help you all maybe think a little bit differently about what you do every day. And this one today is actually a really interesting topic. It's funny because some people might see the words real world data and say, oh my gosh, I'm on the market access side. This is not important to me. But I promise you, as you're going to learn today, as our panelist talks through as they talk through using real world data, what it means to you in the business and how it folds over to the commercial side, and building relationships and developing your value proposition with payers, you will see that it's all very, very interconnected. And that's something we think about here a lot at Magnolia. Our whole team, we are proud to say that we are data nerds. Many of us on our commercial side of the business have worked very much in data and using that twist of pulling analytics into commercialization strategy. And then those on our traditional HEOR, real world evidence side of the business are also very integrated with our market access team. So we're always trying to think of ways to bring those two together and kind of break down those silos, as I think the payment systems in the world and the policies are evolving, that it is getting more and more like that in the world. So without further ado, I am going to turn this over to my esteemed colleagues. Pamela Landsman-Blumberg, who's joined, is our SVP of Real World Evidence and Health Economics. We also have Beni and Martine Etschmaier. I'm going to let each one of them introduce themselves and their work, and then they will dive right in. So Beni, would you like to kick us off with an introduction?
Sure, absolutely. So hi, everyone. My name is Beni Turner. I'm the Director of Real World Clinical Insights here at Magnolia. My primary focus is data curation, so mostly in the secondary data space. But I do work closely with Martine on kind of primary data analysis, market research type initiatives. So a little bit of everything. Martine, do you want to go next?
Hi, everyone. My name is Martine Etschmaier. I'm a Senior Director in our Global Market Access and Value Insights team. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm really excited to give you some more information about how we use data. My focus is it's primarily on payer research and really how we're using those data to gain access through payers, and at the end of the day, that our goal is always to ensure that our patients have access to the product. So really understanding how we use data to get there. So thank you. And Pam?
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, depending upon where you are in the world. I'm Pam Landsman-Blumberg, Senior Vice President of RWE and HEOR Strategy. And my team is really charged with identifying fit for purpose real world data to answer any of your research and business related questions, setting out that HEOR strategy from starting at development all the way through product expiration, patent expiration, and really all kinds of data wherever we can find it. And I think today you'll learn about some data sources, well, what we call data sources. You may not think of them in that way, but hopefully you will as we present, go through the presentation today. So the objectives of the presentation today are first to define unstructured data, talk about unstructured data sources, as I mentioned, considerations when you're curating or collecting, capturing that data, some practical applications, especially both on the clinical side and as well as the market access side, and future trends and innovation opportunities. So I'm going to turn it over to Beni.
Great. So we'll start by just giving some context for the amount of data that's out there, right? And when you hear curation, I'm sure a lot of you think, well, I don't curate data, but I guarantee you that you do. It just might not be as formal a curation process as you're used to hearing when you're used to hearing the term curation. So our big data universe, our data universe, is about 147 zettabytes worth of data based on an estimate that was obtained earlier this year in July. So what is a zettabyte? What does that mean? It's kind of like saying $1 billion. I can't hold it in my hand, so I have no idea what that means. But to give you some context, the 147 zettabytes of data is kind of like if you gave every single person alive in the world right now 40 smartphones full of data. So imagine having 40 smartphones. That's so much data. I don't even think my current smartphone is at 50% of the data I have on it. So there's a lot of data out there, and the sources of data, the collection methods, the curation level, and the analyses that you can perform on these data are very wide and varied, right? So because there are so many different data sources, so many different data types, there are many, many ways to approach collection, curation, and eventually analysis. We'll go through several of those in our presentation today, and we'll talk through common data sources that impact the market access space, as well as some common insights that you can gain from those data sources and how those could potentially benefit your market access strategy. So Pam, do you want to review this slide?
As we've been saying, there are numerous sources of data, some you may not think of. Many of you may be familiar with some free text, maybe in electronic medical records or images, but any image, has a lot of information and possibly unstructured data in it. Videos, any interviews and advisory boards. Data may be unstructured, data may be patient generated. We'll be speaking to some of that. Social media posts contain a lot of valuable information, and what we might say is, information is data, or data is information. And any sorts of communications, emails, especially, really kind of can all come under the umbrella of unstructured data. And unstructured data, there is no inherent organization to the data. So no emails are, no two emails are alike in how they're presented or how they're written. Blog posts, two pictures of the same flower could be very different and provide different information. Maybe one's close up, one's further away, see more detail, or you see the broader context in which that flower is. And it does not fit neatly into any predefined model or schema. So when you're navigating unstructured data sources, most of you are probably very familiar with those that are listed on the left. Healthcare provider notes, pathology reports, imaging reports, claims data, at times can be, unstructured clinical trial results, presentations, the literature, guidelines, etc. But there's a lot more information out there that you might be able to utilize when you're putting your strategy together, and when you're also building out the tools and information for your stakeholders. So there might be information in patents, regulatory updates, policy papers, of course, industry news. We mentioned social media, interviews, which may be structured or unstructured, but even structured interviews may have unstructured information. The responses may contain some unstructured statements and information, and of course online forums. So these, again, on the right, people don't necessarily think of as data sources, but can provide a lot of information and context for your strategy.
And so I just take an opportunity to build upon the methods that Pam and Beni mentioned on the unstructured data sources and go into a detail here on the qualitative data gathered through key methodologies, including a few examples that I have on the slide here. So these are methodologies that are critical in biopharmaceutical manufacture, device manufacturers, to complement clinical research, testing assumptions, evaluating gaps in evidence strategy. So pretty much, again, we are looking for information directly from the horse's mouth, and that horse being our key stakeholders, including payers, providers, patients, those 3 Ps, and through that evaluating how we can gather that patient access and really make a difference through payer coverage. And so I just listed a couple of the examples, and I wanted to focus on the last 3 here. The focus groups, generally smaller groups, multi-stakeholder, where you discuss experiences related to a research question and gather insights, whereas advisory boards are generally longer, again, multi-stakeholder engagements, but you're looking for more of that advice and on a treatment or covered approach. And then Delphi panels are more web-based, iterative questionnaires that focus on a research question, followed up with some meetings and developing a consensus. And why am I telling you all of this? Because all of this has then unstructured results, and what you do with those results can vary. You can do some, automated NLP, which Beni will talk about a little bit further later, or manually. You can manually code the results, reading over each one of the comments, and manually assigning labels. There's multiple different software programs that are used to analyze this, and different types of structural coding that you can use, and all in the end, providing this as a tool for market access as primary market research. So next slide.
Perfect. So to go over the stages of data curation, just to kind of give you a picture of how data gets curated. We start with collection. This is just choosing a source and gathering your data, right? Then you move into the actual curation piece, which is organizing that data, providing structure, making sure there's ease of use, making sure it's stored correctly, all of those things. Then you move into cleaning and quality control. This is where you identify and correct errors, inconsistencies, find duplicate records, missing data, all of those considerations. And then storage and preservation, you need to ensure that your data is stored securely, is accessible for future use. If you have any regulatory requirements placed on the data, there are considerations there for storage and preservation. And then you're reporting, right? So you're going to the stakeholders of interest, whether that be a payer, or if you're writing literature to be published, you're providing those data back. And then some other considerations, some stages that may or may not be needed within the curation space are going to be annotation. So the addition of labels or metadata with the purpose of providing data context. Linking, so if you need to take data from an EHR and link it to SDOH data, or something of that sort, where you're kind of taking the data you've gathered and linking it to another source to provide a larger, more complete database. Compliance is a concern if you're thinking of any data management rules that need to be implemented, ensuring that your legal, ethical, and organizational standards are met, and then monitoring and updating if it's a data set that will be reused. You may want to revisit it every 6 months or year, whatever that schedule looks like. For unstructured data, we're kind of going from chaos to order, right? When we think of curating data, but that exists along a spectrum or a continuum. So there's a lot of room in there for different methods of curation, different levels of curation, dependent upon the data need and the ultimate insight need, right? So to go through just a couple, some loosely structured curation examples can include things like thematic and concept mapping or sentiment analysis. You're taking unstructured data and you're providing some categories to it that, so for sentiment analysis, you may be taking interview data or social media posts and saying, okay, these responses are positive, these are negative, these are neutral, and then maybe you're providing some more detail on top of that. For highly structured data curation, you're looking at things like coding qualitative data, systematic literature review, where you're literally taking data from a free text publication, right, and putting it into a table that gives you things like sample size, treatment of interest, outcomes, all of that. And then clinical chart review and abstraction. For your curation project, the concerns and kind of thinking through how you build your curation, what methods you choose, what variables you collect, all that begins at your project ideation. So you need to ensure that you're addressing bias and trying to control for potential bias. You've got cross-functional collaboration. I fully believe that not everyone who curates data needs to be a data scientist, but you may need input from programmers or data scientists to give you ideas of, because they'll really understand the way that the data flows into analysis, reporting, and insight generation. You'll also think of data reliability, so you want to ensure that your data is continually tested for reliability and accuracy against source data. If that's in a chart abstraction project, you're doing things like IQR reports to ensure your abstractors are reporting in a very similar fashion, right? And then interpreting missingness. So a lack of or missing data, especially within your clinical context, does not necessarily indicate that the thing did not happen, right? It just means that it wasn't recorded. And then because AI, machine learning, NLP, large language models are becoming so big and kind of changing and revolutionizing the way we work and the way we handle data, especially, there are some specific considerations you should keep in mind if you're using any of this machine learning to curate your data. One is the sourcing of data. So your data sources should be diverse. We want to reduce the risk of bias and false positives. You should constantly be training your AI or your machine learning. So, it's not creating hallucinations or data that doesn't exist or returning positive results that are false. You want to make sure that someone is manually reviewing and ensuring that the algorithm is working correctly. And then also your review, so human monitoring. This helps comply with regulatory standards because human eyes are still considered the gold standard, understandably so. So Pam, do you want to talk us through data integrity?
Thank you, Beni. So as we mentioned, you really need to really have, whatever you do, whatever information you're abstracting, you need to retain the source links and audit trails. So you need to, this is a way of demonstrating the accuracy of the information that you captured. There may be, this could be with a regulatory agency, or it could be with your own medical legal review board. If you're pulling out a quote from someone, you want to make sure that you don't misquote them or possibly rewrite the quote where it might ultimately change the meaning. It also allows for transparency of what you're pulling, reproducibility. So some of regulatory agencies may want to go ahead and analyze the data themselves, or they want to go back and pull the information that you said you did. So it needs to be reproducible. And also it, has a level of accountability for what you're pulling.
Perfect. So we'll move into applications for unstructured data, specifically to solve challenges within the market access space. We're going to start out with a couple of examples focused on the non-clinical market access side, and then we'll move into some clinical examples. So Martine, do you want to take over?
Yes, so thank you. And in terms of real world performance, we're trying to gain insight into treatment performance, trying to look for any side effect burden, adherence and persistence is going to be important. Looking at for standard of care, trying to understand a treatment adaptation. So that's going to be of value to our payers. So we're demonstrating that through looking at that real world treatment performance. And, that supports and enhances this mission value through, your reimbursement negotiations, your HTA submissions. Also, in terms of competitor evaluations, comparing real world performance against the competitors, providing that valuable insight for the pricing and positioning strategies. And the next one we wanted to highlight here is the payer's perspective. So this allows, market access and HEOR teams, your core teams, to gain insight on target product profile testing, competitive analysis, really understanding the impact of a competitor launch. What do you do when you get to the market and a competitor is launching? Your economic model assumptions. So you have a lot of valuable ideas through economics models, and you're validating them through payer feedback and an understanding of what payers find valuable in there. Uncovering some patient access, coverage, and reimbursement barriers, and evaluating the launch potential, confirming pricing and rebating strategies. So across the board, really trying to gather those insights to benefit us and to use those data to refine and tailor value proposition and evidence plans to maximize access, to uncover patient access and coverage and reimbursement barriers. So, we're really trying to find that benefit here and evaluate the launch potential and confirm those pricing strategies so you're ready to go at launch. Next slide, please. And so here, in terms of competitive intelligence, another way to look at leveraging unstructured data that comes into you to understand product launches, pricing strategies, clinical advancement, and market strengths and weaknesses. These are the key things that you want to have a handle on, and it will come in an unstructured format. We're all used to reading all these clinical data, but what we want to understand from these unstructured data are, what kind of intelligence can we use to identify market and competitive strengths and weaknesses? Where can we assist with product positioning? What can we do to be proactive in our pipeline? Where can we better fit into the market, understanding the trends that will allow for that increased proactivity in research and development efforts make the money worth it. Identifying emergent trends in terms of off-label use, and tailoring strategies and materials to address these patient experiences. And lastly, to improve treatment adaptation, pricing strategies, patient support programs, and other communication plans to really gather that benefit from the competitive intelligence. Thanks.
Perfect. So we'll move into more clinical examples now. Before we go into the actual examples, I just want to provide a little bit of context around the EHR, what's in it, how big is it, those kinds of things. So EHR data is a really, really rich source of unstructured clinical data. In the US, hospitals alone generate an average of 839-ish terabytes of patient medical data per day. Again, what is a terabyte? What does that mean? So to give you a size reference, that's about 12,000 times the size of the entire Netflix content library, which is a little insane because I don't know that anyone has ever gotten through the entire Netflix content library. So if the EHR, we frequently think of the EHR as kind of an iceberg, right? You're thinking of what you see above the surface, which is your structured data, and then what's below the surface, which is your unstructured data. To give you a relative size example, structured data is less than 20% of the data available in an EHR system. Unstructured data, which is below the water surface, is over 80%. I'll give you some examples of what is in the structured, what is in the unstructured. So for structured, you've got your demographics, your diagnosis and billing codes, which I think everyone is really familiar with. You've got some numerical values like height, weight, blood pressure, et cetera, and then medications. And then for unstructured data, kind of what's below the surface, I won't walk through all of these examples, but this is just to give you an idea of what is kind of missing from your traditional structured analysis, how you could potentially enhance that analysis. Unstructured data may be at different depths under the water surface if we're running with this iceberg metaphor, which basically means that curation difficulty increases with data depth. So do your images need to be read by a KOL? Are there interpretations of provider notes? You need to think through all of the different ways that a particular condition may be recorded within the EHR. There's also, because we know no two sites are alike, there's so much difference between, your Johns Hopkins, your MD Anderson, right? So if the EHR is an iceberg, there are changes in water level. We know that based on coding guidelines, based on organization and site operating procedures, some of the unstructured data may be structured just dependent upon site procedures. To get into the examples, we'll talk first about real-world patient experience. So here we're looking to gain insights into things like patient sentiment, side effect burden, if there are populations that are underserved, touching on off-label use of medications, treatment satisfaction, and unmet needs. So for your benefits, you're going to identify your underserved populations, patient experiences and preferences. You'll identify emerging trends in off-label use. You can tailor your strategies and materials to really address the patient experience and patient concerns in the real world, and then improve treatment adoption, pricing strategies, patient support programs, and communication plans. For the regulatory landscape, you're thinking of kind of tracking regulatory updates, optimizing your HTA submissions, and enhancing your clinical trials using real-world data. So here we're gaining insights into compliance, reimbursement policies, pricing regulations. Are there key outcomes that are occurring, patient perspectives, and getting the data on patient performance and treatment performance in a diverse population, because we know that clinical trials have a well-documented problem with diversity in their enrollment. So in your benefits, you're proactively adjusting your strategy to remain compliant and competitive. You're enhancing your evidence for treatment cost effectiveness. You're enabling timely adaptations to market access strategies, ensuring continuous compliance, and then maintaining that competitive advantage. Here we'll shift into kind of just talking of benefits of unstructured data curation and how that can enhance your market access strategy. So I've got several kind of buckets, and I'll touch on a couple of things from each. So for optimizing pricing and reimbursement strategy, you're getting a comprehensive view of treatment impact on outcomes and cost, which can lead to better reimbursement rates and market access success. Tailoring stakeholder engagement, you're identifying key concerns and priorities of payers, and crafting a more compelling value proposition that aligns with your payer needs. Through doing this, you're improving likelihood of securing favorable reimbursement terms and enhancing your provider engagement and uptake of new treatments. For influencing regulatory and policy adaptation, you're advocating for favorable policy changes. So you're really able to kind of get ahead and make sure you're providing your input and maybe shifting things, right? Improving resource allocation, you're identifying your most receptive markets, healthcare providers and patient segments. You can increase your allocation of marketing and sales, increase the efficiency of your allocation of marketing and sales resources, maximize your return on investment, ensure new products are aligned with market needs and address gaps in the current treatment landscape. Patient-centric strategies, you're enabling development of more personalized market access strategies and improving patient adherence, satisfaction, and overall treatment success, because we know the patients actually need to take their treatment in order for it to be effective. For predictive analytics and forecasting, you're going to be able to predict future market dynamics, changes in demand, if there are any emerging therapeutic areas. You're increasing your strategic planning and risk mitigation, map your patient journeys, identify key decision points and barriers to treatment adoption, and anticipating challenges and optimizing their market access approach. And lastly, for crisis and reputation management, you're able to detect potential issues or crises early, respond quickly to issues and protect your market position, and manage reputation by identifying and addressing negative sentiment, misinformation, or concerns from key stakeholders.
Beni, if I can add a thought there too, we can go back to that slide,
Yeah.
sorry. This is a plug for getting in with policy research. So I personally, my expertise on the team is policy, pricing, and reimbursement. And one of the things that we do is budget scoring. And we try to think about how the Congressional Budget Office might want to score legislation. And often it's very hard to find data to put in front of the Congressional Budget Office, or thinking through data that they might not understand in a very complex system. So we're always looking for unstructured or unique data pieces to put in front of them, because you can get them to think in their box, right? And you try to walk in with them and say, okay, here's every data point that you would think through, but you try to stretch their minds a little bit by giving them some unique data. So using things like this, like having maybe something you've done and published on and are able to take those data points and take those back, even to influence something at the federal level, is really important. And we're actually doing that right now for a client where they have tons and tons of data points that are exactly to what they're trying to pass on their legislation. And we're baking that into a presentation for the Congressional Budget Office to say, look, you might think of your data world this way, but you should think of it this way because of this additional work that's been done. So I think you can really go up even to the government affairs policy level. It's how to leverage these types of studies and make sure that you're getting the data points that you need. And one other thing is next month, we're actually, and I know I'm early announcing it, we'll probably pull up and talk about this a little bit more, but we're going to be talking about payer segmentation and how to use, and trust me, when we do payer segmentation, we're not just going and pulling quick little things about a drug and a payer that we can get online. We have to go through coverage policies and clinical guidelines and really review that and turn that into a very structured data set that we then develop cluster analysis and help do a ranking system and think through payer strategy. And all of that's based on this unstructured data concept. So it definitely feeds into even higher level, like I said, federal government, also thinking through that ultimate payer strategy. So I just want to add a side note to that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So we'll move on and talk a little bit about future trends, because AI is certainly not done growing and being developed and being incorporated into our lives. So there are opportunities for innovation in the unstructured data curation space that I wanted to just bring up and mention. Number one, there will be an increased need for interoperability focus. Here, there are so many digital therapeutics, wearables, sources of patient data that are being patient-generated data that are being developed, that there's going to need to be a really strong focus on, okay, how do we make that data not only usable, but accessible and interoperable with our current, historical or traditional patient data streams, like your EMR, your EHR, those sorts of things. So how do we move Fitbit data from our Fitbit into our EHR and really integrate that with patient outcomes and concerns? For expanding AI-driven curation, there are many companies out there right now doing AI-based curation, whether that's using NLP models or large language models. They're using some form of AI to curate data, especially in the clinical space. That role is only going to expand. As our ability to train algorithms increases, those curation algorithms will become more and more advanced. Eventually, I think we'll get to a point where we can automatically do data tagging and annotation through AI, so that annotation step won't be as manual. And then we'll develop adaptive algorithms, right? There will still be the need for training. You still need to consider all of the things we reviewed earlier. The human review element, ensuring your sources are diverse, but that AI-driven curation will only expand. For ethics, there will be new and novel approaches to ethical considerations needed. I know the regulatory space lags behind the technology a little bit, but as we get a little more technologically advanced, we're going to need to think through the ability for bias detection and mitigation, curating during curation instead of after the fact. So maybe we can actually drive some of that ability for bias mitigation within our AI algorithms. And then development of novel privacy preserving curation methods. So as we think about, the patient wearable data, the digital therapeutics, how that's getting pulled into other more traditional data sources, how do we maintain the patient privacy so that we're staying in line with HIPAA and thinking through ensuring patients aren't having their data used in a way that is negative for them. And then I spoke about the guidelines are likely to lag behind the technology, but I think the people on the forefront of the technology will need to be thinking through these things. For audit trails, your provenance and lineage, these will only become stronger. So you're going to be able to leverage blockchain technology to create records of provenance and lineage. This will ensure transparency and trust in curated data, especially with AI curation algorithms. we could potentially get to a place where we're automating the lineage tracking, so providing detailed data audit trails without the manual labor of someone having to code, okay, every time someone enters a data point, we log who the person was, what time they made the change, and what the change was, right? You'll see a shift to real-time curation. So streamlining data curation allows for innovation in ways to process data in real time from streaming services or sources. So we're going to decrease the gap between data curation and insight, right? So moving to that more real-time curation. And allow for more immediate insights and action and response to signals in the data, whether that be a safety signal or a more commercial signal like patient satisfaction or maybe a payer strategy updates, right? You'll be able to get a little closer to being proactive instead of reactive. We're going to probably move to crowdsourcing and collaborative curation. There are a couple of companies out there that are doing some kind of think groups of physicians are curating your clinical data, right? From a variety of sources. So it's not just their patients they're curating on, it's a larger patient pool. I think that will continue to grow. So we'll continue to develop platforms which will allow for expert networks such as physicians to contribute to the validation and curation of data. This will hopefully improve accuracy and enable sharing of knowledge and expertise. And then lastly, I just wanted to touch on enhancements in data quality and management. So the use of AI is going to empower those automatic data quality checks. So you're getting closer to, if you're thinking of someone manually entering data into a row in Excel, right? Your systems are going to be able to check, is there an outlier? Does there appear to be a data entry error here? Does something seem a little off based on what we know of the data that already exists? So you'll identify anomalies earlier and then potentially get to a place where we're creating self-healing data pipelines. So if the data pipeline breaks at any point, it's possible that we could get to a point where the AI or machine learning can actually go in, heal that broken pipeline and restore the data feed before a person is even alerted to, oh, I need to go make sure this is coming into my database correctly, which would minimize downtime and errors. That's all I have for today. I don't know, Amanda, if you have any thoughts, notes, if anyone has questions.
Yeah, so I've opened up. If people do want to type in questions, please feel free to, while we're kind of letting people put them into the system. I will talk a little bit about our next, just click the chat and you can enter them in. I'll just talk about, our next session, as I mentioned earlier, I kind of let the genie out of the bottle early, but big surprise. We have our new session in September will be all about reimagining payer strategies. So again, this is that idea of thinking about payer segmentation from a more data heavy approach. And thinking through building out your strategy from, again, taking unstructured data, pulling it together into one database to really understand the payer landscape, and then different ways you can move around that analysis and consolidate the information and think through different clustering models to take a very data-driven approach to identifying how to work with payers and then what to do once you're working with them. So that's that session. I do have a couple questions. One person did ask, what are some of the data assets that a client would have on this that you would work with, or how do you kind of work with people in terms of determining where to get the unstructured data that they would want to use for something like this?
Yeah, I think thinking through how you're receiving unstructured data and how you're using unstructured data within your organization today. There's certainly a case for kind of having an initial meeting to talk through, okay, what insights are you currently using? What are your current key drivers of how you're managing your strategy? And then from there, we can think through and create a detailed plan, or if you want a loose plan, I'm sure we can do that as well, on this is kind of where you're getting your current data. This is where we can enhance that data and maybe provide a little bit more nuance or diversity or whatever the unmet need in your current data feeds is.
Great, great. And yeah, one of the places that I like to use unstructured data, because some of it comes in and it is beautiful and structured, but some of it is not, is hub data, and getting what you can from your hub, or working with your specialty pharmacy distributors to try to pull in data on patients and coverage and payer landscape, and then having to think through some of the messy stuff that comes through too. I think that's like a place a lot of people don't run out. Let's go and see what we've got on that side that we can work with, that you do already have more of it in-house than you might realize. So that's a good point, as what do you got? Where do we need to go find what you don't have? I have another question. Has the FDA issued guidance on unstructured data for regulatory submissions, and any ideas of best ways to work with that data, like best practices?
Yes, so the FDA does have guidance on the use of real-world data for submissions, specific to things where you're augmenting clinical trials, right? If you're doing a synthetic control arm or external control arm. They actually updated their guidance earlier this year. If you're working with the FDA and utilizing unstructured data, what I would say is your plan really needs to focus on your curation plan needs to be highly detailed, very specific, and you need to have a very clear audit trail from source to final analysis. So the FDA is going to want to know that your abstractors are using the exact same criteria to evaluate each of your data fields and enter data for you. That's certainly an area I have a lot of kind of information in my brain around. So if you have more questions, I'm happy to have a conversation. But yes, the FDA does support the use of real world data and unstructured data in submissions. It's just a little bit of a kind of toss up on, depending on what team you're kind of pitching to at the FDA, they could be more receptive versus less receptive. I know depending on who you get on the phone at the FDA, responses can vary pretty widely, even though they have their general guidelines, right?
Okay. Awesome. I'm going to check for any more questions. I did get some questions about like the slide availability. So what we generally do after the webinars is we post everything on our website. So what we'll do is I'll send an email out afterwards of all the attendees, and attach the slides, and then they will be posted, as are all the other ones, on our website. So you'll be able to access these. It'll just take us a little bit of time to get everything up and loaded, maybe a day or two, and then we'll get everything out. So let's see if we have any other questions. I'm not seeing any come in, but I'd like to thank our panelists today. Thank you all for pulling this information together. We really appreciate you all joining us. And if you have any questions or would like to follow up, you are welcome to reach out to us either on our website. And I don't know if you all put up, I think there was the last page with people's email addresses, which are also on the presentation as well. So we'd love to hear from you, and hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will see you next month. Thanks so much.
Thank you.